Hi guys, how's it going? Welcome to Real Classic Film Reviews and welcome to what we're going to call this a movie from my collection for each year that I've been alive. Yeah, that just rolls off the tongue. I've seen this video concept a few times and I think it's gone back a few years actually in a few different guises where it's been someone choosing either their favourite movie from each year since their birth up into modern day or just choosing physical media release from every year from their birth to the current day, or even just seeing how far back in the collection they could go in terms of do they own something from every year since they've been alive and beyond. Anyway, rambling over, this is my version of that, and I thought I would do I'd check the shelves and I'd pick a physical media release from every year from when I was born to now, almost just about, as I'll explain in a second. So this is we're going to do it in a bit of a reverse order. So we're going to start with the modern stuff first and go back to 1980, which was the year of my birth. I'll let you do the maths in terms of how old I am, and it's pretty old. There's a pretty big stack of stuff here, which is a bit depressing, but also great for the purposes of showing you some movies. I haven't picked my favourite movie from that year. Some of them aren't available on physical media. I haven't picked the best movie from that year, but I've picked movies that I want to showcase from each year. Sometimes they will be the best, sometimes they'll be a personal favourite, and sometimes there might be a little nugget in there where I think you guys should check it out. But without further ado, like I said, we're going to go back in time. We're going to start with a modern release, and as I don't think own anything from this year, which is the year 2023, the year that you're watching, the year that the video is released, I should say. Although I will be picking up things like Across the Spider-Verse and Asteroid City and things like that. I don't actually own any yet, so we're going to start from the year 2022. So that's my only cheat, I think, throughout the process. So first off, guys, we're going to start with 2022's release of Top Gun Maverick, obviously the sequel to the 1986. It is a classic, Tom Cruise classic, Top Gun. Brilliant sequel from Joseph Kosinski, brilliantly shot. I'm a big fan of Cruise, you know, regardless of what you say about the guy. The films that he puts out are massively entertaining, and I know that's kind of his modus operandi. So Top Gun Maverick, we're going to start with. Going back again, we're going to go Dune, which is one of my favourite sci-fi films probably ever made now. It's really got up there for me. I can't wait to see part two. Really big, epic filmmaking on a huge scale, great cast. I do think, I'm a massive fan of Denis Villeneuve, who made this, who will appear again in this list. Obviously, all-star cast, Chalamet, Zendaya, etc. But great film. Next up, we're going to go with Christopher Nolan's, Tenet, which I'm still trying to figure out. I think I've almost done it. Not my favourite Nolan film by a long shot, but very interesting, and that guy swings, you know. Sometimes he swings and misses, but he takes a swing, and this, I think it really did. I'm proud of the fact that he released it kind of in the height of the pandemic into theatres. It probably didn't do as well, you know, the kind of theatre experience is maybe only just now picking back up, but great original movie. Fantastic. That's a great release as well. Next up, we've got Scorsese's The Irishman from 2019. Only seen this once. Had to split it into two different viewings because of the size of it and the time that I had. So I'm really, really eager to go back and revisit this. But again, it's Scorsese. You know, the whole thing, the Netflix thing allowed him to put together a huge epic, which I think will improve with age. I'm not sure how much the digital de-aging will improve with age. That thing was a little bit wobbly anyway. In a few years' time, it might be wobblier still, but we'll see. So, but great film. Staying on the Tom Cruise train with 2018's Mission Impossible Fallout. Still my favourite Mission Impossible film, even though I've only seen Dead Reckoning Part 1 once. Rewatched this recently and it really is wall-to-wall action. And Cruise obviously trying to do as much of it in camera as possible, if not all of it. Guy's crazy, love it. Another Denis Villeneuve film, which was Blade Runner 2049. Excuse me. One of my favourite sequels of all time already. Love the original. Was very, very hesitant to see this being in production and being released. but it did the trick for me. I thought the story was great. It looked spectacular. I love the way he kind of followed on from Scott's work. So that's a personal favourite of mine. 2016, are we up to now, I think? I'm sure I'll lose my way and I'll be roasted in the comments. I'm going with, there was some great films from this year, but I'm going with Captain America Civil War. I am a Marvel, an MCU fan. Certainly up until Endgame. I think everything post Endgame for me has been crushingly disappointing. But this, I felt, I mean, it's an Avengers film in all but name, but I just thought for that comic book aesthetic of having all of these larger than life characters battling each other, I thought that the Russos really did kind of pull it all together and really set up, you know, the bigger storyline for that kind of Avengers Endgame and Infinity War and Endgame double bill that came. So I'm a really big fan of that. And Downey Jr. does some great work in there. Then we've got The Revenant, going back again still. Probably DiCaprio's finest hour for me. Just thinking, Wolf of Wall Street's great, but I think for what he goes through, Alejandro Inarritu shooting, just on the location photography on this is outstanding. Tom Hardy is excellent in this. The bear sequence is excellent. Just the cinematography and everything is just a complete package. DiCaprio in the centre of it all, just going through hell. Excellent film. Next up, we've got where are we up to now? 2014's Whiplash, Damien Chazelle's Whiplash, which is one of the films, or if not the film, that I always recommend to everybody. People say, oh, just tell me a film to watch. What can I watch? And I always say, watch Whiplash because, you know, not only is it the greatest jazz drumming film you'll ever see, but it's just a spectacular character study. J.K. Simmons, it delivers just an all-time performance in this for me. Outrageous stuff. Practically a horror movie villain in this, but it's excellent. Great music too. Next up, we've got 2013's Gravity from Alfonso Cuarón. I think this is coming back on the big screen soon, and I would always recommend it. I think the impact of this is massively lessened watching it at home on, well, I'm kind of just assuming or presuming that you've got a relatively small screen in comparison to a huge IMAX screen or a huge cinema screen. But yeah, best experience on the biggest screen possible with the best sound possible, but fantastic film. Right, where are we at? Next one is 2012's Skyfall. Is it the best Daniel Craig? It probably is. I think when it first came out and it did so well and the hype train was roaring on it and everybody was saying it was the greatest Bond ever, it's not the greatest Bond film ever, in my opinion. At the time I wasn't even sure if it was the greatest Daniel Craig Bond film ever. Bit of reappraisal, probably is. Probably is. Great film. Personal favourite of mine next is 2011's Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy from Thomas Alfredson, which is the remake of the Alec Guinness John le Carré adaptation. This one, the cast in it's immaculate. Gary Oldman in this is outstanding. A really old school, genuinely old school spy thriller that if you haven't read the book or seen the original version, previous versions, can take a few watches to get to grips with because it's labyrinthian and I'm still not sure I understand it all, but it's a fantastic film, brilliantly made, definitely worth checking out. We're going to go for probably my favourite Christopher Nolan film next, which is Inception, which even on my first viewing of it at the cinema back in 2010, I knew it was great. When the moment that it ended, I thought it's fantastic. It's brilliant. Again, you know, original story. DiCaprio's great in it. The rest of the cast is excellent. Visual effects are excellent. Just huge epic filmmaking that you just don't really see a great deal of or enough of from directors like that. Next film I want to showcase is 2009, Public Enemies, which is a Michael Mann film. Again, Depp, Bale, excellent cast. Don't think it really received a massively positive response on release, but it definitely deserves reappraisal because it's excellent. I know Mann was going through, or was kind of really running with that whole digital filmmaking technique, which is a bit odd, a bit jarring, I suppose, for the time period. But excellent film, and definitely if you've seen it and you didn't like it or you weren't sure about it, go check it out again, and if you haven't seen it, definitely worth putting on your list. Next film is 2008's Iron Man, and the reason I'm going to show this from 2008 is because whether you like it or not, this is obviously being the first, what I would consider the first proper MCU film. I know we had the Incredible Hulk before that, but I think Robert Downey Jr. and his performance in this set the tone for the entire MCU. That kind of playful, half jokey but half serious tone. His performance in this is the MCU for me. I think they took what he did and just took that tone and just ran with it completely throughout the next couple of decades, and God knows how many movies and how many billions of dollars. So when he was in the later stages of this series and getting paid a fortune, it was probably well deserved. Next up is 2000 and where are we at now? 7. No Country for Old Men, which is a Coen Brothers film, which is a kind of proto neo-western. Great Tommy Lee Jones performance in this, but fantastic, of course, Javier Bardem performance in this as one of the cinema's all-time villains. Total nutcase, excellent Coen Brothers film, one of the best Coen Brothers films. Next one I'm going to show is 2006's Casino Royale, which I think is notable, as we'll see in the next choice, notable for being the kind of poster child for how you reboot a franchise, how you relaunch a character. And Casino Royale, I always think is, although it's the first Bond tale, it's an odd film to kind of kickstart with, because there's prolonged periods of this film where people are just sat playing poker. And I know there's a lot of exposition throughout it, but if you don't play poker, as I don't, and you're not interested in cards and things, it's a tough ask for an audience to sit through, and the runtime of this is significant. So I always think it's an odd choice, but it works so well to put it together. Just fantastic stuff. And similarly, I'm going to choose for 2005's choice Batman Begins, because again, what Christopher Nolan did here was take a character that had been kind of semi-destroyed in terms of its cinematic presence by Joel Schumacher and his Batman and Robin movie, which is kind of regenerating a kind of cult following these days because of just the sheer mind-boggling stupidity of it all. But there was literally nowhere else to go, so it could only go this way, this dark, kind of brooding, growly direction, and I think that Nolan and Bale and everybody else involved just absolutely smashed it. All right, guys, future Stephen here, who midway through editing the video that you are currently watching realised that he'd completely missed out the year 2004. I knew there was going to be one that was going to slip through the net, embarrassingly enough. So here it is. Here's my choice for 2004, and that's, as you can see, Mike Leigh's masterpiece, Vera Drake. Amazing central performance from Imelda Staunton here, dealing with what is obviously an extraordinarily sensitive subject in backstreet abortionism. So not the easiest watch, but excellent period detail from a 50s London. Like I said, every single performance in here is top notch. And that's my choice for the 2004 entry. So back to the video. Next one I'm going to go for is 2003's Knack, directed by Joe Carnahan. Still Joe Carnahan's finest work, although I am a fan of The Grey with Liam Neeson. Not a well-known film, I don't think. Jason Patric and Ray Liotta are in a kind of dirty cop, murder, mystery investigation film. Very dark, very gritty, brilliantly acted. Definitely underrated classic, so just check that out. And speaking of underrated classics, this next one, which is from 2002, is Sam Mendes' Road to Petition, which has... I don't think it's ever really got any traction as like a great film or a classic film, but I think this is going to be a modern classic, a future classic. I mean, Hanks, Newman, Jude Law, the 30s period in this is outstanding. Going from the Bond films, a younger Daniel Craig performance in this is a real nasty. If you've yet to see this, Jude Law's excellent in this. Jude Law's brilliant in this. If you've yet to see this, check that out, because it needs reappraisal and it deserves to be watched and spoken about. Next up is probably one of my favourite animated films of all time, which is 2001's Spirited Away. Directed by Hayao Miyazaki, which isn't my favourite Miyazaki film. I think that's Howl's Moving Castle still. But this is a brilliant entry point for people into Japanese animation, or just animation in general. I think it's a great entry point. People who aren't particularly interested or want to get on board, definitely watch Spirited Away. Excellent. Next up is another film that I feel has drifted out of the conversation a little bit, but is certainly deserving of recognition and reappraisal, and that's 2000's Steven Soderbergh film Traffic, which is a kind of all-star cast, multi-storied portrayal of the kind of drug crisis, going from it looks at DEA agents, it looks at parents dealing with drug crisis, it looks at families of drug dealers. It's pretty epic. But yeah, one that isn't spoken about enough, so check out Traffic. Next up is one of my favourite films of all time, a personal favourite of mine, which is Fight Club, 1999's Fight Club, directed by David Fincher. Still Fincher's best work in my opinion. Possibly Brad Pitt's and Edward Norton's finest hour. Helena Bonham Carter in this is excellent. It's probably my most viewed film of all time. I used to watch the VHS of it and the DVD of it just back to front constantly and spot little things here and there. Obviously not just about a fight club, it's about all sorts of stuff, but it's a great film. Right, where we are at 1998, and another personal favourite of mine is my favourite Jim Carrey film of all time, and that's Peter Weir's The Truman Show, essentially turning up and inventing reality TV show. Yeah, what can I say about this? It's so subtle. Some of the things that happen in it and the little character beats and moments in it are so subtle that you'll miss them first or second time round. But as you kind of start to watch it, you start to peel off all of these layers and see all the... It's a very sad film. It's a really melancholy film at points, and the ending of it's spectacular. Next up is, and again, this is neo-noir crime masterpiece as far as I'm concerned, and the film that should have won the Oscar. I know Titanic made a gazillion billion dollars, but the best film of that year was in fact Curtis Hanson's LA Confidential. Russell Crowe, pre-Chewy Kevin Spacey, Guy Pearce, Kim Basinger, Danny DeVito. It's just it's not quite in the same conversation as Chinatown, but it isn't far off, and that's, big praise. Next up, we've got Mike Leigh's Secrets and Lies from, where are we at now, 1996. It's not short, this is quite a long film, but I mean, the acting in this, Mike Leigh, it's one of my favourite Mike Leigh films, but all of his films are fantastic character studies, and this one's one of my favourite kind of family dramas. Heartbreaking, some of the stuff in this is just heartbreaking. A tough watch, but essential. All right, next up we've got Braveheart from 1995, Mel Gibson's historical epic, or attempt at a historical epic. I'm not a historian, and I'm not massively au fait with the period, so I'm watching it strictly on a kind of entertainment basis, and for that it delivers. The battle scenes are spectacular, the acting in it is spectacular throughout. Gibson's accent might wobble a little bit here and there, but in the most part it's great. Yeah, just fantastic stuff. Speaking of which, we've got Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction from 1994. Tarantino's finest hour still, his second film. He's been trying to remake this ever since, I think. People really latched onto this, and the dialogue in it, and the way that people spoke to each other within the film, and the characters interacted within the film. And I think he's been trying to... I'm a big Tarantino fan, so this isn't a diss, but he's been trying to find that again all the way through his career. But this is just the height of it, and it's just the structure of it's genius. The characters are brilliant. Obviously, bringing Travolta back into the fray, movie-wise, masterpiece. Right, next up, we've got a tough but essential film, and that's Steven Spielberg's 1993 movie Schindler's List. I almost put Jurassic Park here because Jurassic Park's a top 10 personal favourite of mine, but I just think Schindler's List, maybe it's not a massively rewatchable film. I still haven't watched this 4K version of it, because I've got to kind of bring myself up to an emotional state to watch it, but it's just such a masterful film, and Spielberg releasing this and Jurassic Park in the same year, I think really Not that it needed to, but cemented his genius. Yeah, again, heartbreaking stuff, but excellent. We've got 1992's Unforgiven. Sorry if there's a bit of glare off the packaging there. Clint Eastwood, Gene Hackman, Morgan Freeman, Richard Harris, who I love in this as English Bob. Again, a real kind of, it's an old school style Western, but it's a rumination on the passing of the West and, those kind of cowboys with the kind of six shooters and violence ended up, what life looks like for them. It's Eastwood, it's a Western, it's amazing. Next up, we've got one of my favourite action films of all time, and that is 1991's Catherine Bigelow directed Point Break. Surfing, skydiving, bank robbing. Swayze at the height of his powers. Keanu Reeves coming onto the scene big time as an action star, obviously a couple of years away from Speed at this point. It's still just such a brilliant film. You only have to watch the remake of this to see how hard it is to make a film like this and to have all those elements and put them together and for it to work. So, props to Bigelow for that. Next up, we've got 1990s The Craze. I am a big fan of the Tom Hardy legend where he plays both the brothers. But for me, growing up, it was the Gary and Martin Kemp playing the titular gangsters in this that were my Cray twins, if you like, out in terms of the fictional Cray twins. Brilliant British gangster film and still really nasty. Next up, we've had some great weather here in the UK just recently, and a great summer movie to watch and complain about the heat is Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, my favourite Spike Lee movie. Just Samuel L. Jackson in this, I think he's fantastic, but just the whole neighbourhood, Danny Aiello's pizza place, fantastic summer movie. That's the summer movie for me. Next up, an action film that you may or may not have heard of, and that is Die Hard from 1988. God, I almost forgot there, crikey. Needs no introduction, it's Die Hard. Another film that needs no introduction is 1987's Paul Verhoeven directed RoboCop, one of the best sci-fi action movies of all time. Excuse me, recently did a full review video of this. Really somber movie in some places, as well as I reflected on that video. As a layer to it that really shows the sadness of what's happened to Murphy in amongst all of this spectacular ultra-violence, which it has on show. Super quotable dialogue. Is it Verhoeven's best? It might be. It probably is. Fantastic stuff. Next up, I keep saying it's this director's best and it's that director's best, but I don't know, that's why I've chosen these movies. And this is my favourite David Cronenberg film, and this is The Fly with Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis again. An absolute masterclass in practical horror. Some of the effects in this still turn my stomach, the gloopy effects, but also, it's a real... Goldblum's performance in this is just fantastic. As he morphs into this kind of fly creature. Really, really well done. And obviously Cronenberg and body horror just go hand in hand. Excuse me. Right, so the next release I want to show, TV documentary, Shower. Now this is not only, it's the greatest documentary ever made. It's that simple. But it's not only the greatest documentary ever made, but it's one of the greatest pieces of film ever released in the history of the medium, for me. Claude Lanzmann's kind of talking heads documentary interviewing the survivors and the workers from Auschwitz and somewhere else, I think. Was it 2 different camps? I'm not sure, but it's epic in length, and its subject matter is so mind-bogglingly heartbreaking that to recommend you watch it is a difficult thing, but I think everybody needs to see it because it's just such a shameful part of our history that some of it, where you watch some of the interviews with some of the SS guards and think, are just mind-boggling to believe You can't believe it. But Shower, you know, I watched that because it's so important, and it seems it seems awful in a way to jump from that release and that piece of cinema into 1984's A Nightmare on Elm Street, Wes Craven's first entry into what would become just a cultural phenomenon, a box office franchise, and create one of the kind of not most famous characters in horror history, but in cinema history as well, in Robert Englund's Freddy Krueger. And although the series went on to become really comedic in a way, and he does have comedic elements in this, it's great to see the darkness in this first entry. Excellent film. Next up, I thought I would show, there was a few films from 1983 I thought I would show, but I really wanted to choose Return of the Jedi because from the original trilogy it's always been the kind of Temple of Doom of the original trilogy. But I think like the Temple of Doom, it's recently begun to be reappraised, and I think it certainly deserves reappraisal in light of whether it's whatever your views are on Lucas's prequel trilogy. My views are not of a positive nature on that trilogy, and whatever your views are on the more modern trilogy, which I have mixed views on, that range from I don't mind it to I will never watch some of it again. The original trilogy of this franchise is something that I grew up with. I had the toys, the merchandise. It's from my era of childhood, and this is the one, Return of the Jedi, that I just remember. When I watch this, it reminds me of Christmas because we always seem to get the VHS tapes at Christmas, or it was on TV at Christmas. So it has that feeling of like childhood nostalgia to me. And I love the Ewoks, I don't care what anyone says. Speaking of childhood nostalgia, we have 1982's E.T., one of the few films that will actually make me shed a tear. I'm not a crier or an emotional person with movies, but the ending of this movie will certainly get my eyes leaking. Just a genius piece of filmmaking from Spielberg. I could watch this probably just every day, every other day, and never get bored of it. And the emotions that it gets you to feel for a little piece of latex puppetry is just incredible. An all-time masterpiece. 1981's An American Werewolf in London, which is still my favourite werewolf movie of all time, not least because of that outstanding transformation, the central transformation. The kind of flat, broad daylight or under the full room light transformation is still astonishing. Some genuinely unsettling jump scares in this thing that have me jumping out of my skin. Jenny Agutter, obviously, always worth your the price of a ticket. And just that sequence at the end in the London Underground is just so creepy. And we come to the end with 1980's Raging Bull. What a film to end on. Scorsese and De Niro both at the height of their powers. Probably my favourite De Niro performance of all time. Well, it is. This always fights with Goodfellas for my favourite Scorsese film of all time, depending on how the wind's blowing. Both very different films. A sports film, but also a character study, a heartbreaking character study. Pesci's brilliant in this. Just such an amazing film. And to think that, what is it now, 40 odd years old, as we both are, pretty incredible. Well, guys, that was a bit of a long video, longer than I'm used to putting out on this channel anyway. That was a movie from every single year of my life. Not my favourite movies, although many of them are. But I thought I would offer a wide selection, a wide range of movies, from classics to modern classics to maybe cult classics. We had some personal favourites in there. We had some of those arty-farty movies that turn up on the greatest movies of all times list occasionally. But yeah, an enjoyable little exercise, and I thank you all for watching if you've stayed this long. Happy viewing. See you soon.